every courtroom drama that we have seen or civics lessons that we learned as kids, we tend to assume that informed jurors, they make for best jurors. We also know the jury selection, a detailed process where attorneys challenge, kick out some potential jurors for any number of reasons. But more and more, it seems, the jurors, they're being picked for what they don't know. Earlier, I talked about this very trend with Dr. Leslie Ellis. She is a director at the trial consulting firm Decisionquest. They help lawyers pick which jurors to keep and which to kick away. You know, I'm sure like a lot of folks, when I saw the recent Times piece titled, "In Juries, Lawyers Now Favor the Uninformed," it wasn't a complete shock that obviously attorneys are going to exercise, you know, their preemptions to try and get out jurors that may be biased against their side. But the scope of it and the trend now to go for people who know as little as possible, it seems that it's not just on certain civil cases, it's criminal as well. It seems like it's a trend. How long has this been going on for?
Well, it's really been a concern for as long as attorneys have been able to do more expanded voir dire, exercise their peremptory challenges. And it's not necessarily that they want jurors who are completely uninformed. I think the question is, or the concern is, are there potential jurors who might know enough about the issues involved in the case that their experiences, their knowledge, their opinions would carry more weight than some of the witnesses involved. When they get into their deliberations, it's quite common for jurors to turn to them and say, okay, you know something about this, explain it to us. And what they know may not be accurate. It may not be as relevant as they think it is. And so that's a big risk.
I get it, but it seems to have gone to a degree here that I don't know was the original intent when we said a jury of our peers. They describe in this the case I think a lot of our viewers are familiar with, the Martin Shkreli case. Real unlikable guy, big farmer, jacked up prices here, hurt a lot of people in the process, and didn't make for a very sympathetic figure. To that end, anybody who read anything about it was basically kicked. And as a result here, we are finding the most uninformed part of the population. Also, anyone who owns stock, for example, for the most part, was also pushed to the side. Half of America owns stock. What we're getting is the least informed, the least interested, and I'm not so sure that's really representative of a broad swath of this population. We don't have to have necessarily PhDs on the, on the jury, but at the same end, do we really want people who have no interest in basically anything?
Well, no. And again, I'm not sure that what you're really ending up with are people who have no interest in anything. But it is true that there's been a big shift over the course of a couple of hundred years in terms of having jurors who are well-informed and familiar to having jurors who might have no experience or knowledge of the case at all. And I think you're right. That does cause a problem in terms of the concept of a jury of your peers. It is very common, however, for jurors who own stock in a litigant to be excused. That's pretty standard. But particularly in this case, where it got so much press, anybody who either had a prescription for any of the pharmaceuticals that his company had been involved with, or other pharmaceuticals where the prices had gone up, those folks are likely, far more likely, to have developed an opinion about the case, or at least about the defendant. And that's really where it becomes a bigger problem, and particularly where the judge will get involved. The peremptories really play a role in the midpoint between a juror who says they can be fair, but you don't really believe them. You suspect that even though they think they can be fair, and they will try very hard to be fair, if all of the press out there is slanted against your client, even if they say they can be fair, if they've read a lot of that kind of seeps into our brain and it affects our decisions. And what may be a bigger concern is, are we eliminating anybody who might know anything at all about the case?
Is it getting harder? I'm curious for you and people with your expertise to divine, likelihoods of behaviors of jurors, given obviously what we're seeing where people now, maybe more than a generation ago, I think would be a safe bet, go into certain areas for their news. They're predisposed one way or the other. And if we exempt all those folks, the people that are left How do you make an educated guess where the heck these folks are going to go? We've seen a lot of surprising verdicts recently. I would imagine it's become harder and harder to do your job.
It is harder and harder, and one of the things that's making it even more difficult, and this has been happening over the course of several years, is that voir dire is getting shorter and shorter, and judges are conducting more of it than attorneys have been historically in the past. So when you've got less time to ask the questions that really get at bias, in a securities case like this, for example, you may suspect that jurors who are very financially savvy do have a lot of investments, maybe not just a 401k, but are actively involved in their investments, might have an opinion that might be stronger or might be more or less judgmental about a defendant than a juror who doesn't.
Now, I got a feeling I know how you're going to answer this because arguably one answer would almost put you out of business, but I know we have the best system going here. Everyone acknowledges that. I haven't seen a better one. However, if you could say, I'm going to be able to pick professional jurors with particular disciplines that are vetted as well as possible here, not to bring their personal baggage, into a deliberation room, would we be better off to have, I'll make it up in this case, that in every, county courthouse, in every federal district, 12 professional jurors that really know financial transactions well, maybe better off than finding 12 folks here and whatever alternates we can find on this Trakeli case? Would we be better off that way than the current system that we use?
I think in some areas of litigation, that's a more attractive option than others. So it is true that in securities cases, some of the information does get really complex. Now, I'm not advocating for professional jurors. You're right that I, for lots of reasons, I don't think that's a good idea. Even though you may have a group of professional jurors who are all securities traders or inventors or insurance experts, their experiences and their backgrounds will still influence them in ways that they'll never understand and that will be very hard for anybody else to understand. So I'm not sure that would really solve the problem. It would probably introduce a whole other aspect of bias and complications and problems. But I do think that we could do a much better job of helping jurors understanding the complex information that they do hear, particularly in these big cases.
And finally, before I let you go, I'm just curious, who are the curveballs, the ones that keep you up at night when you're giving suggestions or advice as to who you'd want to populate the jury pool? Is there one demo of a person that you say, I have no idea, I'm making an educated guess here, I have no idea how this person's going to go, or if it's a hung jury or one way or the other, you almost could guess which is the kind of a person that could go in any different direction once they get into deliberations?
Yeah, I mean, you're always looking out for the strong leaders. And if they favor your client, they could be your biggest advocate. But if they don't favor your client, they can be your biggest nightmare in the jury box. And so a lot of the times you end up striking them because you just don't know. And they are a total wild card. And you'd rather kind of get rid of the risk than take a gamble on it.
Really interesting stuff. Dr. Leslie Ellis, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, you've heard from a jury selection expert. Up next, we're going to ask our attorneys about this trend towards know-nothing jurors.